Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Lecture Series. My name is Scott Sorrell, Director of Global Marketing for Balchem's Animal Nutrition and Health Division. Today, we welcome Lindsay Braunn of HABRI, the Human-Animal Bond Research Institute. The session offers a comprehensive look at the science behind the human-animal bond, exploring how it enhances human health and supports animal welfare. We'll learn how the strength of this bond shapes pet owner behavior, driving decisions around veterinary care, nutrition, and beyond. I'd now like to introduce Lindsay Braunn. As Vice President of Research and Operation, Lindsay oversees HABRI's research grant program, which has funded more than $4 million in research at universities around the world, examining the health benefits of human-animal interaction for both people and animals. She is a co-author of the Handbook on Animal-Assisted Therapy and has contributed to publications on the impact of pets during the COVID-19 pandemic and the public policy implications of the human-animal bond. In her role at HABRI, Lindsay helps advance awareness and application of this research in healthcare, veterinary medicine, and public policy through educational programs, strategic partnerships, and outreach initiative, including HABRI's Pet Week on Capitol Hill. Lindsay, welcome to the Real Science Exchange.
Thank you.
Yours.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate the introduction, and it's so great to be with you all today to talk about the science of the human-animal bond. I'm going to share my screen. Real test of my ability here. Haha. Okay. Can everyone see? Okay, I think that's working. So I'm going to talk a lot about the science. I'm also going to talk about HABRI a little bit and just about what we do with the science, right? And so how we usually like to start off our conversation when we introduce people to the science in HABRI is with this slide. So we all, I think, understand what it takes to live a healthy lifestyle, right? You eat your vegetables and your whole foods and your whole grains and your fruits. You exercise and stay physically active. And what HABRI is really seeking to do is have it so that a healthy relationship with a companion animal is a part of that equation. So our vision is for the human-animal bond to be universally embraced as an essential element of human wellness. And so we, to achieve that, we advance the science. We have a lot of education initiatives and content, and we also advocate for more policies that help society become pet friendly to really advance the role of the human-animal bond for essentially public health. I've used the phrase already, it's in our name, and just to get us all on the same page, the human-animal bond is formally defined by the AVMA as that mutually beneficial and dynamic relationship between people and animals that's considered essential to the health and well-being of both. We're going to dive into the science that shows that it's beneficial for our mental, physical, social, and emotional health, and for animal welfare as well. So a little bit more about HABRI before I dive into the research. So we are a nonprofit organization. We primarily fund scientific research through a request for proposals we issue every year. Since 2014, we funded about 63 projects and counting, all looking at the various ways pet ownership and animal-assisted interventions, like a visit from a therapy animal, is beneficial for our health and wellness. We also have a ton of educational content, as I mentioned, and other resources all housed on our website, habri.org, white papers, and we're really active on social media. Our goal is to help translate the science and share it with others, because we also know from research, which I'll talk about, is that knowledge of the science really boosts pet care and creates for more engaged pet owners. And then we're also trying to tackle big issues facing pet owners and facing pet ownership. We know that there's certain barriers to pet ownership, barriers that actually place pet owners in difficult situations, like in housing. We've hosted an event, our policy forum, several years in a row, trying to tackle some of those big issues. And we also have a new campaign aimed at educating the public about the science and meeting them where they're at to influence or help them kind of consider pet ownership in a positive way. And then we also host some events like Pet Night on Capitol Hill, where we share all the ways in which pets are important in American life and talk about some of the policies that decision makers on Capitol Hill can consider to better support their constituents and pets. And then we have our Human Animal Bond Innovation Awards program. Actually, I mentioned that because our ceremony and reception is happening next week at Super Zoo, where we try and showcase the great work that others do outside of the pet space to honor and support the human animal bond in society. So these are our strategic priorities. This is great context for kind of what I'll talk about later, is like why the science is all important. So we seek to advance the science through our research program, through generating data and information all about the benefits of the human-animal bond. We're really trying to tackle big issues like pet ownership and affordability so that everyone can have access to a healthy pet in their lives, because we know it's so important for human health and wellness. Similarly, we're trying to equip those in human health, especially in mental health, to integrate pets into their profession based on all of the science. And then we're trying to tackle big issues like pet inclusive housing. We know that pose barriers to pet owners. Unfortunately, emergency and transitional housing is not as pet friendly as it should be. So people are oftentimes forced to choose between seeking shelter, whether they're unhoused or a domestic violence survivor, and keeping their pet. And oftentimes will stay in dangerous situations because they don't want to separate from that bond. And then also rental housing is a big barrier. We know there's a lot of restrictions on rental housing as it relates to pets that pose issue for pet owners, like breed size and weight restrictions that make it difficult to have a pet in rental housing. Okay, so diving into the science, I always think it's important to start with sort of where the research is, and then some of the underpinnings and some of the background, because this is a field that's been around for actually decades. While HABRI has been funding the work, HABRI's been around since around 2010 and we've been funding research grants since 2014. The body of research is extensive and we work to share it regardless of whether or not we funded it. So we have science to show that throughout the lifespan, pet ownership and interaction with pets can really be beneficial for everyone, regardless of their situation or their age or their condition. We see there's benefits to physical health. Pet owners are more likely to be more physically active. Dog owners tend to walk more on average than non-owners. And there's also great research that links pet ownership with better heart health and disease prevention. For children, pets teach really important life skills like responsibility and empathy that can be really beneficial for their learning and development, and also protect against allergy and asthma when you have a pet, even when you're pregnant. There's mental and social health benefits of pets. They boost our mood, they make us laugh, they improve our recovery from stress, and reduce our depression and loneliness, particularly even for older adults. Pets are really important sources of that social and emotional support, but also encourage activities of daily living. The routines that pets require, which is a theme throughout the research, really benefits everyone at all stages of life. So getting at some of the theoretical underpinnings of the bond to get a little bit in the weeds here, but I think it's really helpful to set the stage for what the research tells us. So one of the biggest hypotheses that provides support for the bond is that the biophilia hypothesis, which essentially says as humans, we are innately attuned to life and lifelike processes and attracted to animals. We have this innate interest in trying to understand them and be around them. And then there's an evolutionary basis for the bond. Scientists believe we started forming a relationship with dogs anywhere between 13 and 40,000 years ago. And it was common across cultures and across history to share living quarters with pets. We know dogs are descendants of wolves, of course, and scientists believe that essentially the wolves that were more able to kind of hang around humans to get the scraps and to eat were better able to survive. And so we slowly evolved together. The more tamer wolves were more likely to survive because they were able to coexist with humans. And then we slowly started to recruit them in hunting. And then by ancient Egyptian times, pets were, laid to rest in these elaborate tombs with treasures indicating their importance in our lives. So we've co-evolved together, and then domestication has played a huge role, of course, in the animals the companion animals we know and love today. You went from the intimidating wolf to the puppy dog, the big eyes, the childlike features that we have selected for over time. And the retention of those juvenile features is called neoteny, and that's what evokes that nurturing behavior. So essentially, we've selected for these animals that look like the cute pets we love today, and that that leads us to want to care for them and nurture them just like babies. And one of the biggest theoretical underpinnings for all of the scientific benefits and the associations between pet ownership and human health is the social support theory. So as humans, social support is critical for our wellness. Having a community, having people around us that love and care for us is critical. And so the theory is that pets, by providing direct companionship and also indirect support through helping us connect with others, are really integral in providing that source of social support that then lends to other benefits for our health and well-being. And then physiologically, it's proposed that the oxytocin system plays a role in all of the health benefits resulting from our relationship with pets. And so these studies in particular showed that when we interact with our own dog, for example, we see increases in oxytocin, and that's the bonding hormone that's common between mothers and infants. It's all about trust and altruism, but also creating a sense of calm, comfort, and focus. So that increases, as well as other endorphins and dopamines when we interact and look at our dogs and pet our dogs or our cats. And then the same thing in this study was happening in the dog's brain as well. And then we also saw that decrease in cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which is also hugely important, especially for some of the heart health and mental health benefits we see. So it's kind of some of the mechanisms that explain some of the science. And so diving into some of the specific results on physical health and wellness, there's a great research on heart health. Owning a pet is significantly linked to lower heart rate and a better response to a stressful situation. When you're in the presence of a pet, research has found that you're more likely to recover faster from that stressful event. Again, it's kind of the pets are serving as that source of support that help. And then there's also the oxytocin that's maybe going on that's reducing that cortisol. And then some really great research that came out a few years ago that actually influenced the American Heart Association issuing a statement saying that pet ownership is beneficial for heart health, found a significant association between dog ownership and reduced risk of mortality after a cardiovascular event. And just in general, there's improvements in longevity when you had a dog. And that's all probably linked to the physical health benefits of being active and walking, but also the stress-related benefits of having a pet present. And it's not just dogs. There's a really great study on cat ownership showing that if you ever owned a cat in your life, you are significantly less likely to die 1 year after a heart attack. And again, I think it's all linked to that social support that pets provide. Mental health and well-being is a huge topic, obviously, in the public health discourse. And we all know loneliness is a huge public health epidemic especially in light of the pandemic. I think the Surgeon General declared it a public health epidemic not that long ago. But pets are really important for everything from that stress buffering to alleviating anxiety. They boost our mood. They make us laugh. They reduce depression. One of my favorite studies is focused on people experiencing a long-term mental health condition and how pets can provide an important source of routine that that keeps them feeling secure and provides them with a sense of responsibility and self-efficacy and self-esteem, and also distracted from rumination and bad thoughts, and kept them present and mindful, helping them cope with their condition. And so I think that's hugely important, especially when we think about overall wellness. And then there's tons of really great research showing that indirect source of social support, that social capital that pets facilitate. This one study by Lisa Wood found that around 40% of pet owners reported receiving one or more types of social support resulting from the people they met through their pet. I think many of us can relate to, knowing our neighbors' pets' names more than we know our neighbors' names, or just kind of facilitating all of that interaction because we're out walking our dog, or we're even asking for like favor exchanges and reciprocity. People are constantly looking for help in caring for their pets in their community, and that that intuitive finding has been shown in research that it's really beneficial for getting to know others, forming friendships. You go to the dog park and you strike up conversation, but research has shown that even pet owners are more likely to be engaged in their communities more broadly. And then for social isolation and loneliness in particular, pets, especially for people living independently alone, are really beneficial in terms of reducing feelings of loneliness. Even a therapy dog intervention can support reducing loneliness in hospital settings and nursing homes for older adults. So it's not just necessarily owned pets that can influence this. And then when you think about, someone who might not have a lot of interaction, who's somewhat isolated, taking their pet out, even to the veterinarian, can be a source of interaction that's really beneficial to them and a natural part of taking care of a pet. And yeah, how many of us have struck up a conversation with a stranger? I think there's also research that shows that, people with pets are more approachable as well. So they're great conversation starters, getting us, interacting. For older adults, as I've mentioned, the pets are really great for encouraging activities of daily living, like the simple things, climbing stairs, preparing meals, bathing independently. The routines that pets require, that care, is really beneficial for someone who's aging. And there's really great research even recently to show that pet owners have slower rates of cognitive decline and dementia. And I think it's all related to the stimulation that pets require, whether it's, engaging with them, playing with them, or taking care of them. That's really great for healthy aging. For children, there's really good work on self-esteem and studies that show that children are more physically active, that families function better when they have a pet dog. In particular, we funded that study a long time ago. We also funded the study in Australia that looked at physical activity and play levels in children with family pets, and found that those children definitely had more activity and even less screen time because they were more likely to be engaging with their animal. Pets in the classroom are really beneficial. They serve as this motivating presence to keep kids engaged with learning. And then children with autism in particular can stand to benefit from either pet ownership or animal-assisted therapies. A lot of interventions, even ones that we have funded, have focused on adding a therapy animal to a traditional social skills therapy. They're often characterized by having some deficits in terms of communication and social skills, and pets can serve as this non-judgmental presence that really helps them interpret and communicate. And we've even found that they're more likely to engage in talking and other language and therapy when they have that presence of that pet. So how does HABRI contribute to the research? I will just take some time to talk through some of our work. I mean, we obviously work to share everything, but we're trying to encourage a strong pipeline of this research Through our annual RFP that we issue around every October, we cast a very wide net focused on everything child health and development through healthy aging and mental health and wellness. This year, for the first time, we did a special call on housing. We wanted to add data to the conversation to get at that strategic priority of ours and try and really support more data and information to tackle that issue, whether it's providing justification for more policies or policy change in terms of removing restrictions, supporting pet owners that are renting. Some of our published findings we're super proud of. We funded one of the first ever studies on service dogs for veterans with PTSD, comparing those with a service dog to those on the wait list to receive one. And we found that veterans with a service dog saw significant decreases in PTSD symptomology, increases in quality of life, sleep quality. They were just better able to get out there in the world. And service dogs, you're able to go out in public with them, and they're specially trained. So a significant benefit to these veterans. The VA currently only funds service dogs for veterans with a physical disability, and we're trying to change that by, supporting legislation that is seeking to also allow them to provide for a psychological disability like PTSD. We also funded the largest ever study on pets in the classroom, third and fourth grade students collecting parent, teacher, and student reports on the impacts of having a small animal in the classroom. We really primarily looked at the parent and teacher reports, maybe because there's maybe a little bias among the children's reports, but we overall found that there were significant improvements in pro-social behaviors like sharing, as well as reduced hyperactivity and inattention, those problem behaviors, and improvements in reading comprehension as well. And that's, again, kind of at the basis that pets are that motivation, that non-judgmental presence that keeps kids engaged and focused and motivated as well. And we utilize that work to support programming. I know there's a organization called the Pet Care Trust that provides grants for teachers to have a classroom pet. I know I had one as a kid, and it was always just so much fun. And I think it's really the fact that we have research to support that programming is really important. We also really care about the welfare of the animals involved in all of our studies. We're really proud of this one in particular, where we funded a piece of the Canines in Childhood Cancer study, which was looking at the benefits of a therapy dog visitation program on pediatric cancer patients and their families and their stress. And we looked at the dog's welfare. So the researchers collected salivary cortisol samples, and they videotaped the interactions and coded the behavior, and were able to say, after examining all of that data, that the dogs were not undergoing any undue stress by relieving stress. And so we love to be able to utilize that work to support those kinds of programs, which we know are super prevalent, especially these days. And that was several years ago. We also have funded a study on therapy dog visits for children who have been admitted to the emergency department for anxiety, which is actually kind of common. We found that in addition to traditional therapy, adding a therapy dog visit really reduced their anxiety, and also their need for anxiety reducing medication. We love it when our studies have that clinical results and are able to take that to those who are administering those programs or those in human health to say there's actually measurable results that they can use to justify that kind of complementary therapy. And then one of my favorite studies that we've ever funded is the Fostering Felines study. I think this is just a great example of the kind of work that we try and support. A lot of our research is on dogs because they're easily trainable and very prevalent, but we always try and also have some cat studies in the mix or some other types of animals that we're looking at too. This was one of our first ever cat-specific studies, and it was funded at the University of Georgia. They paired older adults living independently alone with shelter cats, and tried to understand if that relationship had any impact on the older adult's mental health and the cat's ability to get permanently adopted. So they were like a foster. And the study provided some startup supplies litter, food, treats, toys, and routine veterinary care throughout the course of the 1-year study, which was really great because we were able to show that when you remove some of the barriers to fostering or pet ownership, that people are really willing to welcome a pet into their home. We saw a significant improvement in loneliness of the older adults participating in the study from from baseline to 4 months. And virtually almost all of them ended up adopting their foster cat permanently after the year, which was what they were eligible to do, indicating that the bond was super strong and super beneficial. And we have tons of wonderful content from this work. And I think it's really supporting more of these kinds of programs and partnerships between shelters and, whether it's an older adult community or something similar, you can really help cats get adopted. We know that fostering is really great for acclimating them to homes, but also help older adults and their mental health. This was just one testimonial from the study that moves me. It's Marion. She said, Frankie, her cat, makes my day, and he makes it worth getting up in the morning. He is my constant companion and the most affectionate cat I've ever had. He also responds when I speak to him. I think it's just a great example of the impact that the study had on these older adults and the cats. I'm proud to say that we're going on to funding an actual robust clinical trial, repeating that study with more participants and a control group as well, which enhances its quality and hopefully we'll have even better results to share going forward to really provide that justification for that kind of work. But this is also just lastly a sample of the type of work that we fund, and we're really trying to emphasize the translational element of research. Like, it's not enough just to do the research and you're advancing the field, which is awesome, and finding more things out, but to have an element that's translational for a practitioner or for pet owners, we're really trying to encourage that, and even for policy. So for example, we're looking at everything with this class from the link between pet ownership and mortality mediated by loneliness to actually first-time mothers, and whether or not having a pet dog supports their mental health. Postpartum depression is really huge, and that's a very critical time for the bond, right? A lot of millennials, my generation, and Gen Z are having pets before they have children, and so that's a huge transition when you actually have a child and already a dog in the household. And we learn about all the benefits of that relationship through that really challenging time. We're also looking at end-of-life experiences of pet owners who recently lost a pet, and trying to better understand what their needs are, how to improve outcomes in situations, and inform veterinary care and veterinary practice to ensure that the conversations that are happening are effective or they're happening earlier. We know from past research that this is a pivotal time for the bond. It can really break it if you have a really negative end-of-life experience. And so, if the conversation could happen earlier and not feel as rushed and things like that, what can we provide to veterinary teams in terms of training and best practices to, help them, encourage future pet ownership? Because sometimes when they have such a bad experience, they don't necessarily not ready to have another pet, but also have that good relationship with the veterinarian as well, which is so important. We're looking at validating seizure alert dogs. And then we're also examining a pet deposit assistance program in Denver. That's a recent policy that was passed to provide deposit assistance. So oftentimes rental housing will require a pet deposit to cover any damages or even pet rents over time. And so this is evaluating the implementation of that support program to see if pet owners that are participating in the program are more likely to be able to keep their pet over the course of a year and to feel more secure in their housing as well. So that's definitely the kind of work we're trying to fund in doing our special call. This happened to be a part of our general call the year prior. So we're looking to really infuse more data in the housing conversation there. So shifting gears a little bit, talking more about how, academic research can take some time to publish. So in between all of that, and what HABRI really seeks to understand is the experience of pet owners as it relates to the human-animal bond, how it impacts their pet care behavior, and their perceptions of the bond. And so I think we all very much know that pets are part of the media, especially within the last decade or so that I've been with HABRI. I've seen an increase in coverage and people talking about pets positively and the health benefits. But we really always want to understand like how pet owners are experiencing everything and what do they know. And one of the things that's very apparent from our data and other research is that across the board, pet ownership is very common. This is what we say to elected, to policymakers too, is majority of your constituents have a pet in the household, 71%. We also know from our work that majority of pet owners are spending most of their day with their pets, that globally, I'll talk about a survey we did across 10 countries and 19,000 pet owners, 95% consider their pet to be an important part of the family. And many, almost virtually all pet owners report positive health benefits from owning a pet. So while we have all this research to show that pet ownership and interaction is beneficial, people are actually experiencing it on an individual level when we ask them. So we know from our benchmark survey of pet owners, 87% say that their pet positively influences their mental health. And this conversation, it's mainstream in the media, but people are also talking to their healthcare professionals about pets. 1 in 5 pet owners have had a pet recommended for their health by their doctor or therapist. I think, there's more widespread acceptance of that. And we know from some of the work that we funded that when doctors and other health professionals ask their patients about their pets, do you have a pet in the household? That can really reveal a lot of clinically relevant information about someone's lifestyle, someone's environment, and help improve rapport. And all good things happen in the doctor's office when you ask about pets. We also know that awareness of the science is indeed growing. There's a lot of recognition of all the mental health benefits. I think in relation to what's being talked about in like public health conversation, you can see the top benefits here are all the highest and they're all related to mental health. When we looked at everybody, 97% of the pet owners were aware of at least one health benefit, related to the science of the health benefits of pets. But we also know that awareness of the research boosts pet care and welfare. This is really key and part of the work that we do to educate people about the science. It's all because we know it has really great implications for animal care and welfare. People are likely to say that they're more likely to maintain their pet's health by keeping up with vaccines, veterinary medicine when they know about the science. They're less likely to skip visits to the veterinarian, more likely to take just better care of their pet overall, and that includes providing their pet with higher quality nutrition, even spending more on their pets. Talking about the science also boosts pet acquisition. People are more likely to recommend a pet to their friend or family member if they know about all of the research that shows that they're beneficial. They're more likely to get an additional pet or get a pet if their pet passes away in the future. And then just overall, people are more likely to, bring their pet with them, integrate their pets in their lives when they're knowledgeable of the science. I love the top line. They're more likely to even take better care of their own health. And when they know that pets are so beneficial for their health, it inspires them to take better care of those pets, but also to take better care of themselves, which I think is great. So this is our survey that we did across the 19,000 pet owners in 10 countries. And this was across continents. So we have like Japan, China, Brazil, the EU, the UK, the US. So it's very broad in terms of we were trying to understand if the bond was more of like a Western phenomenon or very US focused or not. And so we first set out, this was the first time that we created our HAB score, which is our measure of the strength of the bond, represented across 4 distinct dimensions: attachment, humanization, commitment, and integration. There's 14 statements. So essentially we have people agree or disagree to all these statements on a scale of 1 to 5. So 5 is strongly agree. If you strongly agree to all of these statements, you get the top score of 70 and the lowest score is 14. As you can see globally from this chart, the green and the blue represents agree or strongly agree with all of the statements in the HAB score. So across the board, globally, people are very highly bonded to their pets. And this is the distribution from this study. The average was 57.5 for all pets out of that 70. You can see it's not a bell curve. Everyone's clustered towards the top. Cats were a little lower. Just, I think generally we find that people are less likely to say that they take their cats with them when they travel. I think that's changing a little bit. This was now a few years old. And since then, we've incorporated the HAB score in other studies and found the average is more like 60 out of that 70, which is amazing. And so for the purposes of this study, we analyzed the differences between basically we split people up into 3 lower bond, mid bond, upper bond tiers. It's really strong, stronger, strongest, because as you can see, there's like no one at the very bottom, just to see if the strength of the bond had any impact with how people are caring for their pets. And we found that strongly bonded pet owners, dog and cat, engage in more preventative care. You can see from these charts, the darkest color is the highest bond, and then the lightest is the lowest bond. And so the green arrows indicate statistical significance. So there's a very highly likelihood that highly bonded pet owners are engaging in more preventative care, whether it's providing their pet with flea and tick products or annual checkups, vaccinations, screening tests, supplements, and things like that. And the same holds true for cat owners, as you can see with the dark green versus the light green and the green arrows. So, by strengthening the bond, by talking to pet owners about the bond, we can encourage more engaged pet owners. And we also ask this same group, this international group, about whether or not the knowledge of the science would have an impact on their future behavior. And from the green chart on the very right, where we're combining the agree and strongly agree, you can see that largely people believe that knowledge really influences positively their behavior as it relates to taking better care of their pet. And they're even more likely to spend more money on their pet's care. And all good things happen when we discuss the science and when we share it and when we encourage the bond in society. Going back to our benchmark, so this is just where we ask kind of about support for policies. We've actually recently refielded this survey. We do it every 5 years or so. We don't have the results just yet, but we surveyed non-pet owners as well. And what I can say about that one is that across the board, there's even very strong support for a pet-friendly society among the non-pet owners. So even if they don't have a pet, they recognize and support a more pet-friendly society. Everyone agrees that more hospitals, nursing homes, schools should welcome therapy animal programming. There should be less restrictions on pets in housing. All sorts of ways that pets should be integrated in society more, even at work. So moving along to our advocacy work, this is a piece of what HABRI does. We know basically we're driven by all the science that shows that pets are beneficial. The human-animal bond positively impacts our health and well-being. If that's true, which it is, and the bond is experienced universally and growing stronger by the day, we should be supporting efforts to encourage pet ownership, to ensuring that people can keep and care for healthy pets, to improve public health. And so we really utilize our research to try and drive policy change and to support programming, right? We are a research organization. We don't support or provide funding for on the ground work, but there's so many organizations doing wonderful things to, basically have pets and therapy animals accessible in all sorts of places, and alleviating stress and providing joy. So we're trying to really use our research that supports all of this work, whether it's housing or supporting veterans with PTSD and service dogs or pets in classrooms. One of our other kind of different studies that we use a lot for helping support public policy is our healthcare cost savings study. We worked with economists at George Mason University to pair a lot of the scientific studies with actual healthcare cost savings and identifying where we could say, pet ownership contributes to reductions in healthcare costs. And so we were able to, where there was data available, we were able to come up with $22.7 billion in healthcare cost savings associated with pet ownership annually. That might be a drop in the bucket, but it's still important when we talk to policymakers who want to understand the budgetary implications of a piece of legislation. We're able to use this work. And on housing, we use our data that we've fielded with our partners at Michelson Found Animals Foundation, the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, to make the case for more owner-operators of rental housing to remove restrictions on pets, or public housing to remove restrictions on pets. Our data shows that 33%, about a third of existing pet owners would get another pet if their housing allowed it. And then 35% of non-pet owning renters would get a pet if restrictions were lifted. So by making more pet inclusive housing, we can find up to 8.5 million new homes for pets. And that data is now a little bit old, so I'm sure it's even more. And so we're really focused on trying to make change in this area. We had our policy forum this past spring on this topic, and we've joined a new coalition called the Pets and Families Housing Coalition as well, that's trying to advocate for more state and local legislation focused on more pet inclusive rental housing. We're also really particularly proud of our People and Animals Wellbeing Act that we helped to introduce last year. This bill seeks to include, or proposes to have, veterinary care expenses be included as eligible expenses for health savings account and flexible spending accounts. So it's just a tool that something that many of us are eligible to have through our employer, but it's just providing another avenue for pet owners to be able to provide care for their pets, or to spend on their pets' care. Hopefully, addressing that issue of affordability and access to care as well. So, and we often use that healthcare cost savings study to talk to policymakers about this bill. So other resources that I've mentioned throughout the course of the study, of the presentation today, that we do a lot of content and provide a lot of education. This is a great example of that. Our partnership with Mental Health America, we created the Pets and Mental Health Resource Center. It's an online hub that's attached to their website. Mental Health America is a nonprofit organization that screens people for mental health conditions. They screen, I think, 7 million people a year, and link them to resources and care. And what they can do is, those who actually, they added a question in their screener about pets, and they're directing people to this hub where we've provided a ton of information and educational content on pet ownership, on the mental health benefits of pets, for those who are just interested in learning more and really trying to set them up for success. If they're embarking on a pet ownership journey, what do they need to consider to be prepared to find the right pet for them? And so this is our way of reaching that community and people more widespread, and sharing the science in a really great way. And we're really proud of that partnership and that work. And then I mentioned earlier our public awareness campaign, The Real Reason for Pets, launched earlier this year. This is a campaign that's geared towards influencing young people to consider adding a pet to their lives. We know there's some headwinds against pet ownership related to, the costs and lifestyle and all the factors that, people cite as reasons they don't have pets. We're trying to, share the science, share some really great resources and information to encourage people to consider pets in their lives. And so we do it in a fun way. We pair some of the research with some humor. I can show the video in a little bit. We have a PSA, but there's a website with plenty of resources and ways to be engaged in the content too. We have a partner toolkit that anyone can download and post about the campaign. We're very active on Instagram at Real Reason for Pets. And we're also present at some conferences. This is some examples of the social media content. We've partnered with some influencers to reach broader audiences and share the science that way, because we know we're just trying to meet people where they are. So I mentioned conferences. We were at Global Pet Expo for a little activation and really engaged with all of the attendees at that show. We brought Bob, who was like a naysayer. He was convinced he didn't need a pet. And we had people come up and talk to him about all the ways pets are good for you and share their real reasons for having a pet and kind of wear him down. And at the end, he got a pet, which was a really fun. You can follow his journey on our Instagram page. But to take it all home, I really want to emphasize that I know many of you are in the pet space and what you do to support the bond is super important. You help people care for their pets, whether it's ensuring they have access to great nutrition or other things. You're a champion of the bond, and I want you to internalize that. That's really always our message for folks in the pet care community, is that by helping people care for their pets, you're really supporting the bond. So I encourage you to learn more about the science, share it with others, utilize our resources and our campaign to do that, and just find ways to support policies or programs in your communities as well. But thank you so much for having me. If there's time, I'm going to share this video. Is that okay? Great. Good from the beginning. This is the real reason PSA.
You're considering acquiring a pet? Remarkable. So many scientific benefits. Improved mental health, better heart health, reduced loneliness, even longer life expectancy, all of which are supported by an ever-growing body of research.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, and love that for us. Still, the real reason people get a pet isn't all the impressive stats. It's stuff like this greeting, this very confused ring bearer, this world-class side eye, and all of this. You might not get a pet because of the science, because they love you in the simplest, purest way. They curl up beside you when everything's just too much. They get you outside, they make you laugh, and all these things are really good for your heart.
Science explains the benefits.
And it's love that explains the rest. Get a pet. Find your reason.
So I encourage
You're considering acquiring a...
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have a little quick chat with some Q&A, but I hope that you've learned some things in this presentation and really appreciate the time.
No, I want to thank you, Lindsay. This has been a great presentation. Appreciate you joining us. Before we get started with the Q&A portion today, we'd like to share a brief video, and then we'll be right back to answer the questions submitted during today's presentation. All right, great. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the Q&A tab at the top of your screen. Lindsay, I'm going to take the first question. HABRI's done a lot of great work. What would you say is some of your biggest accomplishment?
Oh boy. I think just being largely, I think when we're trying to move the field forward, we're really focused on supporting those policies. We were able to really make a difference on the domestic violence issue, where survivors often, we were finding from the data that they weren't leaving a dangerous situation out of fear of having to leave their pet behind. And so with some partners and a coalition, including from folks in the domestic violence space providing the shelters, we were able to help pass the Pet and Women's Safety Act, which provides it's a grant program that helps more domestic violence shelters be able to take in pets as well. So it's things like that where we fund the work, but we also are able to utilize that work to influence larger societal change. I think that's really what we're proudest of generally. That was just an example.
All right. During your presentation, you had an impressive list of projects that you're going to be working on in 2025. And Casey has a question relative to the gap in research and is asking, you've done so much research. If you could run a large study on the benefits of human-animal bond, what would it be?
I think we really want more longitudinal work. So something really robust that looked at pet owners over time and was able to show differences. What we're currently doing, one of my favorite studies that we're doing right now that I'm really hopeful for, I think this is a great example of like what I would like to see, is work that's getting a little bit more at the mechanisms, right? Because a lot of the studies that I shared were on like the associations, but we're not quite certain. We have those theories of like what is actually going on. And one of the studies we're funding that's still underway is looking at the gut microbiome to see if pets have a if they contribute to the richness and diversity of the gut. In terms of like the sharing, the microbial sharing that's going on. We think of their dander and all that kind of stuff. And so the study in particular is looking at dental patients who have undergone a procedure and in need of antibiotics. And so they're not only comparing the composition of our guts and how we're sharing with pets, but also the convergence back to baseline when dysbiosis occurs, which is what happens when we take antibiotics. And then if pets contribute to like a faster recovery from in terms of the course of the antibiotics. So I love studies like that. And I think there should be more of them that really get at what's really going on either in our brains or physically, that pets are contributing to. So I'm excited for hopefully some results later this year on that project.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There's so much we're learning now about the microbiome, and I hadn't even thought about the interaction with our pets at home. Hazam has got a question, and you kind of touched on this before, but he's wanting to know the benefits of pets with children suffering from autism.
Yeah, so it's definitely, we're seeing that pets can serve as like motivation for traditional therapies, helping relax them and get them more engaged in. So essentially a lot of what we focus on, or a lot of the autism work, is looking at like an intervention they have traditional social skills therapy where they work with humans. Can the adjunct of a dog, for example, really benefit them as they work on their social skills development and their language skills? We also proudly funded a cat study focused on children with autism and their families to see, the dogs are quite boisterous sometimes, right? They're loud, they're big, they don't always have a calming presence. Whereas a cat is a little quieter, a little more reserved. So maybe looking at whether or not adopting a cat is potentially more suitable for certain families where, autism can sometimes be characterized by that overstimulation of outside factors. So that study found that the adoption of the shelter cat was successful. The cats didn't experience any major stress because we looked at welfare of the cats as well, and that the children saw decreases in anxiety. So there's all sorts of ways that children with autism and their families can stand to benefit from a pet. But it does, I think what we're trying to understand better is in what situations and what kinds of animals might be most suitable for certain situations. And obviously there's a huge spectrum, so you have to take that into account as well.
Yeah, interesting. I've got a question here related to horses, but I'd like to add to that is, what else relates, have you learned from maybe like pets like reptiles? Is the bond the same? Is the benefits the same, or do we even know?
Yeah, I think.
But answer the horse one first.
Okay, the horse one, there's a lot of studies on equine assisted services and therapies. We funded a handful of them. Horses, we're actually, a lot of the studies are based on horses are very, they'll react to even if you're not acknowledging the feelings that you're feeling. The horse is very attuned to all of that, your stress or your state, your mental state. And so even some of the studies are related to riding horses and how that can be therapeutic for someone with a physical disability, but also for someone who's experienced trauma or substance abuse. can working with a horse on the ground, like doing different activities, whether it's grooming them or just interacting with them, help people realize how they're feeling. Because if the horse is clearly exhibiting signs that like, oh, that person's like a little stressed or I don't want to be around them, like they can really learn a lot about themselves and be more mindful and really benefit from that therapy. So yeah, the equine assisted interventions are super fascinating and very dynamic, and we're proud to have funded a few of those studies. I think one of which will be finished soon and hopefully have some published results. I think that one was looking at children, but we've looked at autism, we've looked at people with Parkinson's, and also people that have experienced trauma.
Interesting. All right. Dr. McCullough is asking, we continue to hear pet ownership is declining and people are returning pets to shelters and rescues post-COVID. What trends are you and your teams seeing across the country, and are there regional differences, socioeconomic impacts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question. The COVID pet situation is really interesting. I think what we're hearing now is actually a lot of people who got pets during that time, when you think about it, it's almost 7 years ago, their pets are aging. And so, the theory, what we're hearing is like, oh, they need more support for caring for an older pet. And so that's one thing we're hearing as far as trends. And I definitely, there's the human animal bond. What we found largely, and especially from like our survey work, is incredibly universal across like socio-demographics across the country. So it's not, everyone is highly bonded, but I think there definitely are different needs. Like obviously people who, there's a lot of work recently on, costs and things like that, and how we're really focused on how to better support people who are maybe a little more challenged by pet ownership, because I think everyone's highly bonded. Everyone wants the best for their pet, but people have different needs in terms of their, care and being able to, make sure their pet's healthy and well.
Yeah. The next question comes from Tina. You mentioned that some people hesitate to adopt again if they have had a difficult end-of-life experience.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked on any evidence-based approaches that can help them welcome another pet without feeling that they are replacing the pet that they had? Yeah.
No, pet loss is really huge. And I think our work primarily is around, or what I've seen too in the research, is focused on looking at grief after the loss of a pet, and really demonstrating that it's not really much different than the loss of a human. And so like making that more of like a serious, making sure there's support for people who have lost a pet. And I know there's a lot of great organizations that are doing that. I'd say, more of our funded work is focused on how to make sure that end of life conversations happen earlier. I mentioned that like pets are aging, like how can it's going to become a big issue, and how can we better support the veterinary teams that are, oh, your pet's aging, like here are some things you might want to consider down the line, or like dealing with a chronic condition. I think a lot of the work is more focused on how to have certain conversations earlier or prepare people better, so that they don't feel rushed during those decisions, and that they have somewhat of a plan for that, so that their experience is overall better and they can really focus on honoring the bond instead of having, that stress. So I think that's really where the work that I'm familiar with and what we're involved in is more focused on as it relates to loss and grief.
Yeah. Got an interesting question here from Stefan. How do you think the human-animal bond will evolve over the next generation as people have fewer children, work remotely, and increasingly view pets as family members?
Yeah. I mean, I think pets are just, even across like the decade or so that I've been with HABRI, I've seen, people are just, they want to be able to integrate more in their life. And so I think when it comes to things like workplaces, I know there's some conversation now, like people are maybe remote work is sort of declining a little bit. I don't fully know, but I've heard like there's a lot more of return to work. So, I think what we're focused on is how to encourage more pet inclusive workplaces, whether it's like allowing more flexibility for people to care for their pets. I think that's what people will really want. More public spaces and places to accommodate pets, like hotels or restaurants, and even cities. And I think the housing issue we're really focused on because we see that as something that really needs to change, and that policies just haven't changed just because they haven't been looked at. And, the traditional like, oh, no dog over 45 pounds or no more than, one cat or something is just not really matching what the reality is for a lot of people, what people want. So we're focused more on those, making society become more pet inclusive and to consider pets in also just the general public health conversation, because we know that pets can be a barrier to care seeking, and that if people don't have options to either accommodate their pet or address their pet's need, like if they're going into hospice and they want to know that their pet's going to be taken care of. So there's some organizations filling some of those gaps, but I think we'll see more of that and more of a need for more policies to be in place to support pets at critical junctures in our life and just integrate them more.
Yeah, great answer. Sujo says, it sounds like there is an opportunity to increase studies with cats. Do you see any differences in the benefits of having cats versus dogs?
I think it comes down to people's like individual lifestyle and what they value. I think obviously we know like cats are slightly less, they demand certain less things in terms of their care, in terms of like the walking and the even like you can kind of leave a cat for maybe some longer periods of time. They're a little more low maintenance, so to speak. I guess it depends on the cat, but I think it's just about lifestyle mainly and what's most suitable. And that's what we're focused on, is trying to educate people and have them think about, we can set people up for more successful bonds if we, educate them on thinking through what pet might be best for them. But yeah, I think, we're always looking to fund more studies that involve cats, just because we know a lot of people do have cats, and cats were on the rise for a little bit too, according to some of the data. And when multiple pet households are often cat dogs. So we want to just kind of up the research in that space and better support people who are considering cat ownership.
Okay, good. So Cindy wants to know if most pet owners affirm that their pets are good for them. Why do we need this science?
Yeah, I love this question because, it's basically like confirmatory science. But I will say, and hopefully what I got across to here today is like, we are really focused on what we do with the science. We need the data, we need the research when it comes to speaking with policymakers or people in public health or social service providers that aren't currently incorporating pets or supporting people with pets directly. So we really need the data to underscore the issue and provide justification for whether it's a housing policy or the PAW Act that I talked about, or supporting in the incorporating pets into services. So it's really necessary when it comes down to larger societal change.
Yep. So I see we're well past the top of the hour, Lindsay, and I appreciate you and the audience for sticking with us. This has been very interesting. I've got one more question for you before we close it out here. How does HABRI partner with brands in the pet industry to share the positive message of the human-animal bond with future pet owners?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, we get a ton of our support from those in the pet care community across, nutrition manufacturers, pet care products, animal health. And so we're super grateful for that support. And I'd say we really work on educational content. We're open to working with anyone who wants to share the science, because we know it's so beneficial to, rising tide raises all ships. If we can educate more pet owners about the bond and the science, we can create better care and welfare for animals as well, and more improved public health. So we have our Real Reason for Pets campaign. We really encourage everyone to always utilize that and all of our other resources on our website. And so we work with brands to make that easy and make it easy to share and translate the science in their content.
Well, thank you very much for that, Lindsay. This has been a great presentation. Enjoyed spending some time with you here. And thank you to everyone attending today's webinar. If you have additional questions, please submit them to anh.marketing@balchem.com. The Real Science Lecture Series continues with educational topics each and every month. On October 7th, we welcome Allison Rezer Hamburger of the Pet Sustainability Coalition, where she'll present Designing for More Sustainable Pet Industry, data-backed trends in ingredients, packaging, and innovation. Visit balchem.com/real science for more details on future webinars and to register for upcoming events. Balchem's podcast series continues to offer a deeper dive into our webinar topics. Log on to your favorite podcast platform and search for Real Science Exchange, or just go to balchem.com/real science or slash podcast. Sorry. And if you want a really cool Real Science Exchange t-shirt, just subscribe to the Real Science Exchange, leave a comment, a 5-star rating, and then send us a screenshot of that along with your address and t-shirt size to anh.marketing@balchem.com. We'll get that off to you right away. And on behalf of Balchem and Lindsay Braunn, thank you for joining us today. Great job, Lindsay. Appreciate you joining us here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Take care.